What is up, guys? It is just one day after my last video where it was just crazy windy out. But today, literally no wind. Crazy. Today's gonna be a little bit different video than usual because I have something a little bit different. A couple months ago, I purchased an 8mm lens because I was sick of being stuck at 16mm on my crop sensor, which is actually 25. So I bought the 8mm, but that one had some focusing issues. And when I tried to fix it, I ended up stripping the screws. So I just sent it back, said it was broken, and I never purchased another one. But 2 days ago on Amazon, I saw another 8mm lens, a used one that was half off the retail price, so I just jumped on top of that, and it came today. So I have the 8mm lens on. It's a Samyang version. I have the Samyang 16mm and I love it, so I went with Samyang this time instead of Oshiro. And from what I can tell, when I took it out of the box, it's a great lens. So come out here to my trusty spot a short walk away to come test it out. If you've been watching my previous videos, you know about Dan's van. That's been in 2 of them. And there she is back there. Well, she, whatever. Dan the ice cream man. So I've got the lens out, it's on the camera. You will notice that the front of the lens is sort of convex. It bulges out. And that's just because that's how a lot of fisheyes work. Almost all fisheyes work. And it has a special lens cap to combat that. It's actually like a bowl almost to be able to fit over that. And it just fits right over the lens hood. Now what I'm not going to do, and obviously because it's already out, I'm not going to do an unboxing. I just think that's kind of dumb because you're not here to watch me take it out of a box or run through the specs. I mean, that's stuff you can read on the internet, and I assume you know how to open a box. So the first thing I'm going to do is run it through sharpness tests with some of these rocks in front of me here, because really that's maybe the most important thing about a lens, is whether it takes good pictures or not. What I'm going to do is put the lens at f3, or leave the lens at f3.5, focus in the center of the frame, and take an image here. The next aperture notch is f5.6, so it jumps 4/3 of a stop, I think that is. So I'm going to adjust the exposure, 2, 3, 4, and take another image, and then adjust it to f8, 1, 2, 3, and take another image, and then just to speed things up, I'm going to just go all the way to f22, and then take one last image here. I'm going to show these on your screen, but I'm just going to go to review images and zoom in and kind of just look at it here in the field. So when I zoom in, f3.5 looks very, very soft. It almost looks like a sort of an Orton effect. You can see things, but there's just no sharp edges. It's like the edges just sort of bleed. So I'm going to switch over to f5.6 now, and you'll notice it gets significantly sharper. Significantly sharper. And it's actually not too bad. And then we'll go to f8 now, and you'll notice it gets even sharper. Now going up to f22, it's definitely better than f3.5, but it definitely gets a lot softer. And obviously that's just how all lenses work. They have sort of a sweet spot in their apertures, which is normally about 3 stops from its maximum. Going through all of them on my own, I noticed that f8 was the sharpest, which is about the same for almost all lenses. Now, on my overall opinion of the sharpness, for the lens being, its retail is $200. For the lens being $200, I would say that the sharpness is pretty acceptable. And I'm not going to be using this 8mm a whole lot, so I wasn't really concerned about sharpness, and I'm a stickler for sharpness, so I'm not going to be real lenient on sharpness. I know what sharp is, but I mean it's acceptable, and you can fix a little bit in this in post. And the photos I'm showing are unedited, so they are straight out of the camera. It's what the lens actually sees. I guess one other thing we can look at is the color, and that's a pretty hard thing to sort of judge, because that, looking on the camera, you kind of have to compare two images side by side with the exact same settings with two different lenses, because it's just hard to know. It all depends on your white balance setting, your exposure setting. It doesn't look super gray or anything like that. It's not foggy. I mean, overall the contrast is good, and it just looks like an overall good image. There's no significant vignetting at f8. There's slight vignetting at f3.5, but it's nothing you can't fix in post. Now, one of the most obvious things in a fisheye is distortion. And yes, there's going to be distortion. If you move your horizon or any sort of edges away from the center of the frame, you're gonna get a little bit of that distortion. So when you're shooting any sort of a landscape, you're gonna want to put the horizon as close to the middle of the frame as you can, because otherwise you're just gonna get a bowed horizon or a concave horizon, whatever. But as far as interior photography goes, like real estate photography or even architecture, this isn't exactly a great lens. You can fix some of the distortion in post-processing, but this is a fairly cheap lens. The distortion is fairly significant. So yeah, it's not going to be something good for real estate or close-up architecture photography. So just keep that in mind. So I know I've done a lot of talking, and what you really want to see is images. So I'm gonna just take a bunch of images, some verticals, some horizontals, just so you can get an idea of what the images are gonna look like. So I'm gonna get to that now before it gets too dark. You'll notice with the image I just showed there, and I'll kind of like turn around here, that with this creek there's sort of a line from the bank running along the left side here. And because it's fairly close to the camera, it starts to sort of curve towards the edge of the frame. I might be able to fix that a little bit in post-processing, but not really enough to keep the rest of the image looking normal. It's just something you got to be careful of, is with a lens like this wide, it's really hard to use something like this on a full frame. I think the most people who are going to buy this lens are going to be people who are using crop sensors who want to get a little bit wider than the traditional lenses that are just 16 millimeters. So yeah, you just got to be careful with lines. That's really the biggest issue. And if you like a little bit of distortion, then have at it. But we get to a sunset spot real soon. But I just wanted to show real quick, using this sort of path here, how you can get some really dramatic images with an 8mm. So this is really the reason I wanted the 8mm, is for some more dramatic images than with the 16, which is essentially a 25, and the 8mm on a crop becomes a 12.8, but basically 13. With the field of view of it, you can get some really dramatic images with the depth you can get. So anything in the distance looks really, really small and far away, and things in the front especially if they're towards the bottom of your frame, they just look so much larger, and it just leads to very dramatic images. I'm just going to take an image where I walk out onto this path a little bit, and you'll see how I just look super, super small, yet the foreground still looks really close in the front, and it just gives it so much more depth than you get at a focal length like 25 or 24. So I've done something kind of stupid. It's below freezing outside. I extended the tripod legs for that last shot, and now they're frozen out because they were in the creek, they were a little bit wet, and all of that water froze. So the joints are now frozen, and I can't put the legs back in. So I've got to carry it until I get somewhere warm where it'll melt. I don't think I'm in the right spot for sunset, so I may move to a different spot. But real quick, there's one thing I forgot to talk about. So I'm going back to the very first photos, the ones where we were testing the, I can't talk, my mouth is numb. Going back to the very first photos where we were testing the sharpness. One thing I did not talk about was edge sharpness. So I'm going to zoom in here to, you know what, I'll go to like the very, very bottom corner, bottom left corner. That's my foot, never mind. I'm going to go to the very bottom right corner. Now, at f3.5, it's obviously very soft like it was in the center of the image. When I move to f5.6, there's only a slight improvement. So it's still pretty soft along the edges. And when I move to f8, which was the sharpest at the center, it's a lot better, but it's still not nearly as sharp as the center of the image is. So there is a decent amount of softness at the edges. I would say that with this lens, you can't use it to sell professional photos. You gotta have something a little higher quality than this. But if you're just someone who takes pictures for fun, who posts them on like social media, you don't necessarily need the sharpest images because they get compressed anyway. If you want to blow photos up into a print, that might be depends on how much of a stickler you are for quality. I shoot on a 24 megapixel camera, and I think at f8, 24 megapixels, the images they're plenty sharp. Obviously the edges are a little bit soft, but the edges aren't necessarily the most important part. So overall impressions about this lens so far, it's fantastic. I love it. I have another Samyang lens, the 16mm. It is sharp as nails. So I decided to go with another Samyang this time instead of the Oshiro. Don't buy the Oshiro. It's the same lens. It's a lot crappier quality. So Samyang is definitely fantastic with quality. Rokinon is probably just going to be just as fine. Canon doesn't make a lens like this. But yeah, I've had fantastic experience with Samyang. If you want to get the 8mm lens, Samyang is a fantastic way to go, or Rokinon. I don't think you suspect it, but I'm not being paid by anyone to say this stuff. Samyang is a fantastic manufacturer, along with Rokinon. I haven't had a Rokinon, but I know those lenses are very similar. So you're good with either. If you're not trying to blow your images up into 20 by 30s and sell them to people or sell images commercially, this lens is fantastic. I'm really impressed with it, and I think I'm definitely going to keep it. I guess we'll see how the next few days goes with it, but I think it's definitely a keeper. But otherwise, sunset is way too far on the horizon, so I can't get an image there. That's going to be it for this. Hopefully this was helpful. I didn't do the whole unboxing, obviously, or really showing the specs. I think mainly when people are looking at lens reviews, they're just trying to see what the images look like. So that's kind of what I tried to do. If you liked this, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe. I'll be using this lens some in the future, so look for that. I might end this with a couple of astro shots. I might run this through some astro tests, star photography, but I don't suspect this is going to be that great, since at f3.5, like I said, it's very, very soft, and that does not really work for stars. So might take a couple just for fun, but don't be looking at this lens if you're going for astro. I have mentioned the 16mm a couple times. My 16mm is an f2 lens. It is an absolute beast for astro. So if you want something that's decently wide and you want to do some astro, the Samyang 16mm f2 lens. It is absolutely fantastic for star photography. It is my favorite lens in the bag. So yeah, that's definitely one to check out, even for landscapes. If you think that this lens is too wide, the 16 is definitely wide enough for a lot of landscapes, and it is so sharp, even at f2. It is fantastic. I am so impressed with it. So I think that's going to be it. I'm just going to sign off now. If I do take some master photos, I will show a couple of those at the end. But otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Peace.